Industrial silicone injection. On February 6, 2011, a 20-year-old student from London checked into a Hampton Inn near Philadelphia International Airport. She wasn't there for sightseeing. Claudia had traveled over 3,000 miles for a black market cosmetic procedure. She was an aspiring model and dancer who believed a curvier figure would help her career in music videos. In a standard hotel room, far from any medical facility, Claudia met with Page Victoria Winslow, a woman who called herself the Black Madam and claimed expertise in cosmetic procedures. Winslow was neither licensed nor trained. The procedure cost Claudia $1,800, a fraction of what legitimate surgery would have cost. This was Claudia's second visit. She'd had the same procedure months earlier without incident. The procedure took place on February 7th. Winslow prepared industrial-grade silicone, a substance never meant for human implantation. Using syringes, she injected the liquid directly into Claudia's buttocks. The material was the type used in machinery lubricants, not medical-grade silicone. Winslow sealed the injection sites with crazy glue. Within an hour after the procedure, Claudia began experiencing chest pains and struggled to breathe. The industrial silicone had entered her bloodstream through damaged blood vessels at the injection sites. Silicone traveled through her circulatory system, reaching her lungs, brain, and liver. Winslow left the hotel, telling Claudia's friend to call an ambulance if she didn't improve. 3 hours after the procedure, around 4:30 p.m., emergency services rushed Claudia to Mercy Fitzgerald Hospital. Doctors discovered that silicone had caused a massive pulmonary embolism, blocking the blood vessels in her lungs. Doctors worked to save her life. They intubated her, administered blood thinners, and attempted to clear the blockages. But the silicone couldn't be removed. Her condition continued to deteriorate despite maximum medical intervention. At 1:32 a.m. on February 8th, approximately 12 hours after receiving the injections, Claudia Aderotimi died. Medical examiner Dr. Frederick Hellman determined the cause of death was a pulmonary embolism caused by silicone injections, and ruled the manner of death a homicide. The Black Madam was convicted of third-degree murder in March 2015 and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. Toxic injections. In March 2012, a 31-year-old mother of 3 from Broward County, Florida, died after years of enduring substances that slowly destroyed her body from the inside. Her story began in 2007 when she sought affordable cosmetic enhancements from a woman named O'Neill Ron Morris. Morris, who called herself the Duchess, had no medical training or license. She operated out of various homes, apartments, and hotel rooms, offering buttock enhancements for a fraction of legitimate clinic prices. Shatarka paid approximately $2,000 for treatments between 2007 and 2010, believing she was receiving medical-grade silicone. The procedure involved injecting substances into her buttocks, hips, thighs, and breasts. Morris sealed the injection sites with superglue and cotton balls. Shatarka received approximately 10 injections during this period. Over time, disturbing changes appeared. The areas around the injection sites hardened and became hot to the touch. The flesh turned black. Painful lumps formed beneath the surface. By 2011, Shatarka recognized something was seriously wrong and wrote to Florida Department of Health investigators about her complications. The substances didn't remain localized. Medical evidence showed they migrated through her tissue and bloodstream, eventually accumulating in her organs. By 2011, Shatarka struggled to breathe. She was incarcerated for identity theft when her condition became critical. Prison medical staff transferred her to a hospital in Tallahassee as her respiratory system continued to fail. Each breath became more labored. On March 17, 2012, after suffering for 18 months according to her mother's testimony, Shatarka Newby died from acute and chronic respiratory failure. The medical examiner determined the cause was massive systemic silicone migration from the cosmetic injections. After Shatarka's death, at least 30 other women came forward claiming they had also been disfigured by Morris's procedures. One victim nearly died from complications and lost both hands and feet to amputation following a staph infection. O'Neill Ron Morris was charged with manslaughter. In March 2017, she pled no contest and was sentenced to 10 years in prison plus 5 years probation. Post-operative collapse. On November 9, 2007, the 58-year-old mother of music superstar Kanye West entered a Los Angeles surgical center for what she believed would be a routine cosmetic procedure. As a former university professor with a doctoral degree, Donda had approached the decision carefully, or so she thought. She had consulted with Dr. Jan Adams, a surgeon who had appeared on television shows and seemed to have legitimate credentials. The surgery planned was extensive. 5.5 hours under anesthesia for a combination of liposuction, tummy tuck, and breast reduction. What Donda didn't know was that another surgeon had previously declined to operate on her after discovering she had a pre-existing heart condition. Medical records indicated she had coronary artery disease with 50 to 70% blockages in 2 arteries, factors that put her at high risk for surgical complications. The procedures themselves showed no evidence of surgical error. After 5.5 hours on the operating table, Donda was sent home to recover the same day, a decision that would later be heavily criticized by medical experts. Standard protocol for such extensive procedures typically requires at least 24 hours of professional monitoring. At her home in the exclusive Playa del Rey neighborhood, Donda was under the care of her nephew Stefan Scoggins, a registered nurse. However, the day after surgery, Scoggins left to attend a baby shower and could not be reached. Donda was left with her assistant and a friend, neither of whom had medical training. That evening, November 10th, Donda's condition deteriorated. She experienced a sore throat and tightening in her chest. These symptoms worsened throughout the day. According to reports, she had taken up to 20 Vicodin pills in less than 24 hours. When her friend and assistant found her unresponsive, cold, and not breathing, they called emergency services at 7:35 p.m. The women struggled to follow the dispatcher's CPR instructions. Paramedics transported her to Centinela Freeman Hospital, arriving around 8 p.m. Doctors attempted resuscitation but were unsuccessful. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Donda West was pronounced dead. The coroner determined she died from coronary artery disease and multiple post-operative factors. Anesthesia, death. On January 7, 2004, the 54-year-old best-selling author of The First Wives Club walked into Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital for what was considered a minor cosmetic procedure. Olivia Goldsmith, born Randy Goldfield, had achieved tremendous success with her novels, many of which had been adapted into films. She decided to undergo surgery to remove loose skin under her chin. The procedure was classified as outpatient surgery, typically completed in under 2 hours, with patients returning home the same day. As Goldsmith underwent anesthesia, complications occurred. Her literary agent later stated that she had a heart attack, and doctors were unable to get oxygen into her system. The medical emergency happened as the anesthesia took effect. Despite the medical team's efforts, Goldsmith fell into a coma. The exact sequence of events during those critical moments has not been publicly detailed, but what is known is that oxygen delivery to her system failed, resulting in brain damage. Because Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital did not have an intensive care unit, emergency personnel transferred Goldsmith to Lenox Hill Hospital, a larger facility better equipped to handle such severe complications. There she remained in a coma, her brain function showing minimal activity. For 8 days, machines maintained her breathing while doctors monitored her condition, hoping for signs of recovery that never came. The case would later draw scrutiny when just 1 month after Goldsmith's death, a second patient died at Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital during a facelift procedure, also from anesthesia-related complications. New York State officials launched investigations into the facility following both deaths. On January 15, 2004, after showing no improvement in brain function, Olivia Goldsmith's family made the heart-wrenching decision to remove life support. She died at 5 p.m., surrounded by friends. Following her wishes, her organs were donated. She was 54 years old. The tragedy carried bitter irony. Goldsmith had built her literary career writing satirical novels about the pressures women face regarding appearance and aging, yet she died pursuing the very standards of beauty her work had critiqued. The embolism. On November 26, 2009, the 38-year-old former Miss Argentina entered a clinic in Buenos Aires for a procedure that promised to enhance her already striking appearance. Magnano had won the national beauty pageant in 1994 and had maintained a successful career as a model and event organizer since then. As a mother of twin sons, she had decided to restore the shape of her buttocks through a surgical enhancement. The procedure she chose was a gluteoplasty, more commonly known as buttock augmentation. The surgeon recommended injections of a liquid substance that would add volume and contour. According to reports, the injectable material was PMMA, a synthetic polymer. Friends later said she believed this was a routine procedure with minimal recovery time, perfect for her busy schedule. During the surgery on Thursday, the doctor injected the liquid solution directly into her buttocks. The substance was meant to remain localized in the soft tissue, creating the desired fullness and shape. However, something went critically wrong. According to her close friend Roberto Piazza, the liquid went to her lungs and brain. The next day, Friday, November 27th, Magnano was rushed to a hospital in Buenos Aires with acute respiratory deficiency. Dr. Gonzalo Cortez y Tristan, who received her at the hospital, reported that she arrived with severe breathing problems. Her condition continued to deteriorate over the following days. Doctors identified the cause as a pulmonary embolism. The injected material had traveled through her bloodstream and blocked blood vessels in her lungs. Despite medical intervention, Magnano remained in critical condition for 3 days. The damage to her respiratory system was severe. On November 29, 2009, after 3 days of intensive care, Solange Magnano died from the pulmonary embolism. She was 38 years old, just 3 days before her 39th birthday. She left behind a husband and her 8-year-old twin sons, Bruno and Lautaro. Her death sparked nationwide debate in Argentina about cosmetic surgery regulations and the use of injectable fillers. Questions arose about whether the doctor who performed the procedure was properly certified, highlighting concerns about safety standards in the country's growing cosmetic surgery industry, liposuction perforations. On April 10, 2002, the 36-year-old wife of Scottish football star Colin Hendry entered Broughton Park Hospital near Preston, Lancashire. A mother of 4 children, she sought liposuction to restore her figure after childbirth. The procedure was meant to be straightforward, a routine cosmetic enhancement with quick recovery. The surgeon, Dr. Gustaf Anjonsson, performed the operation. What was supposed to be a simple procedure became a 7-year nightmare. During the liposuction, the cannula punctured Denise's bowel and colon 9 separate times. These perforations weren't immediately detected. She was sent home despite the catastrophic injuries. Within hours, Denise collapsed. She was rushed to Royal Preston Hospital, where NHS doctors examining her were, according to Colin Hendry, extremely disgusted and pretty much mad that such damage could have occurred. Medics discovered the cavity created during liposuction was contaminated with the contents of her bowel. The punctures had caused her abdominal wall to die, leaving an open wound requiring constant dressing. Denise spent 2 months in intensive care fighting blood poisoning and septicemia. She survived, but her body was devastated. She required a colostomy bag and faced ongoing medical complications. Over the following years, she underwent a series of operations attempting to repair the damage. Her once active life became dominated by hospital stays and medical procedures. In her diary, she wrote, "I wish I could turn back the clock about 6 years. This is an awful nightmare. I just want my life back together for my kids and Colin's sake." On April 22, 2009, Denise underwent a 16-hour reconstructive operation at Salford Royal Hospital's National Intestinal Failure Unit. Professor Gordon Carlson led the surgical team through the enormously complex procedure. Initially, medics were delighted with the results. But on May 5th, Denise suffered sudden neurological deterioration. A bacteria called Klebsiella, which naturally occurs in the gut, had spread from her stomach to her lungs and then to her brain, causing meningitis. Despite intensive care, her condition worsened. After 11 weeks with Denise in a coma, her family made the heartbreaking decision to switch off life support. On July 10, 2009, Denise Hendry died, age 43. Dr. Anjonsson had voluntarily removed himself from Britain's medical register in 2003, Mexican anesthesia error. On October 30, 2018, the 36-year-old Dallas real estate agent arrived at the Reno Center in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. She had crossed the border with her fiancé Enrique Cruz, seeking affordable cosmetic surgery, a rhinoplasty, and breast implant replacement that would have cost significantly more in the United States. The procedures were originally scheduled for 7 a.m., but were pushed to noon because surgeons flying in from Guadalajara were running late. Laura changed into a hospital gown and completed paperwork while clinic staff prepared. The surgery was expected to take 4 hours, and Cruz was told to return at 4 p.m. When he arrived at 3:30, staff told him they hadn't been able to start the surgery yet because the anesthesia hadn't worked out. What should have been a routine procedure had gone catastrophically wrong. According to doctors at the Mexican hospital where Laura was later transferred, the Reno Center had administered the anesthesia incorrectly, putting it in the wrong place in her spine. Instead of flowing through her body as intended, the anesthetic went straight to her brain. Laura's blood pressure dropped dramatically. Her brain swelled, her kidneys failed, and she went into cardiac arrest. For 8 hours, Laura remained at the Reno Center while staff attempted to address the crisis. Finally, at 9 p.m., Cruz was told Laura needed to be transferred to a hospital. She had fallen into a coma. The clinic initially told him only that the anesthesia wasn't wearing off, and they didn't know why. Only later did they reveal she had suffered cardiac arrest. Laura was placed in a medically induced coma to prevent further brain damage. She spent nearly a week in intensive care at a Mexican hospital, which refused to release her until the family paid the outstanding medical bills. Eventually, her family transferred her by ambulance to El Paso, Texas. American neurologists delivered devastating news. Laura had suffered profound brain injury and would never walk, talk, or eat on her own. After nearly 3 weeks, Laura's family moved her to hospice care. On November 24, 2018, surrounded by family, Laura Avila died. She was 36 years old. The surgery she had traveled to Mexico for never began, the Liposuction. On March 17, 1997, the 47-year-old La Habra resident entered an outpatient surgical center in Irvine. She had scheduled an extensive cosmetic surgery package that combined full-body liposuction with facial procedures, a mini facelift, brow lift, and laser skin resurfacing. Judy Fernandez weighed 150 pounds and had researched her surgeon carefully, even checking with the California Medical Board before proceeding. The operation began that morning at a New U Plastic Surgery Medical Group with Dr. William Earl Mattori Jr., a Yale-educated, Harvard-trained, board-certified plastic surgeon. Under general anesthesia administered by Dr. Robert Kanungu, Judy remained unconscious as the surgeon inserted a cannula, a hollow metal tube, through small incisions across her body. The device broke up fat cells before suctioning them out. Standard medical guidelines recommended removing no more than 6 pounds of fat during a single procedure, but the surgical team continued well beyond this limit. Hour after hour, the operation continued. Medical board records later showed that the surgeon removed 15 to 20 pounds of fat and fluid during the 10.25-hour procedure. Throughout this extended surgery, Judy's blood pressure remained dangerously low. The surgical team pumped more than 14 liters of lidocaine-laced tumescent fluid into her body, while the anesthesiologist administered nearly 19 liters of intravenous fluids. By the time the procedure ended, Judy weighed 183 pounds, 33 pounds heavier than when she arrived, her body swollen from forehead to toes. Her condition became serious while still at the clinic. The doctors waited 2 hours before finally calling 911. When paramedics arrived, Judy was not breathing and had no pulse. Clear fluid leaked from the liposuction incision sites as she was transported to Irvine Medical Center. Despite emergency interventions, Judy Fernandez died approximately 2.5 hours after paramedics transported her to the hospital. The Orange County coroner determined she died from hemodynamic shock, a combination of massive blood loss and lidocaine toxicity. The Medical Board of California found both physicians grossly negligent and incompetent, ultimately revoking Mattori's license. The case revealed that no blood replacement had been available during the high-risk procedure. Compressed air. On November 14, 2024, Mohammed Kendirci arrived at a carpentry workshop in Bosova, a municipality in Şanlıurfa province, Turkey. Kendirci worked as an apprentice through the Vocational Training Centers program, learning the trade alongside other young workers. The workshop was a place where teenagers gained skills and earned money. That day, Kendirci was working his usual shift. Co-worker Habib Aksoy was also present, along with other workers in the facility. What began as workplace interaction turned violent. Aksoy and another unidentified person grabbed Kendirci. They tied his hands together, restraining him completely. His pants were forcibly removed. Aksoy took a high-pressure compressor, a tool typically used for cleaning sawdust and debris from workshop equipment. The machine generated air pressure strong enough to remove particles from tight spaces and machinery. The compressed air was directed into Kendirci's rectum. The pressure was extreme. The internal force caused catastrophic damage to his intestines and organs. Kendirci's condition deteriorated rapidly. Emergency services were called. He was transported first to Bosova Mehmet and Ver Yildirim State Hospital, then transferred to Balaklagol State Hospital, and finally to Heron University Research and Application Hospital, where he was admitted to the intensive care unit immediately. Kendirci remained in intensive care for 5 days. Medical staff worked to stabilize him, but the internal injuries were too severe. On November 19, 2024, Mohammed Kendirci died. Aksoy was arrested immediately following the incident but was released on probation. After Kendirci's death, authorities arrested Aksoy again and formally remanded him in custody. Turkish parliament member Suat Özçadaş publicly stated that the boy was subjected to torture. He criticized those who turn a blind eye to child labor in the country. The prosecutor's office had initially characterized the incident as joking around rather than torture. Authorities continued searching for the second suspect involved in the assault. Retaliation shooting. On February 15, 2014, just before 1 o'clock in the morning, Adrienne Broadway was in a car with 6 other teenagers in Little Rock, Arkansas. The group had a specific destination in mind. Months earlier on Halloween, Willie Noble's teenage son had played a prank on them. Now it was time for payback. They called it a retaliation prank. The teenagers arrived at Noble's home with supplies, rolls of toilet paper, cartons of eggs, and mayonnaise. The vehicle stopped in front of Noble's home. The teenagers got out and vandalized his son's car with toilet paper, leaves, eggs, and mayonnaise. The prank was complete. The teenagers returned to their car and drove away from the property. Inside the house, 48-year-old Willie Noble heard the commotion. He came outside and saw his son's vandalized car. He went back inside and retrieved a firearm, telling his wife, "Whoever it is, they'll be back." Noble waited and watched. When the teenager's vehicle returned and someone got out, Noble opened his front door and opened fire. 4 to 5 shots were fired. Bullets struck the fleeing car. The shattered glass from the gunfire caused injuries to the driver's hands. A bullet entered the vehicle and struck Broadway in the head. The car drove to a come-and-go gas station on Baseline Road, where emergency services were called. Adrienne Broadway was transported to Little Rock's Children's Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Noble was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, committing a terroristic act, and 5 counts of aggravated assault. In November 2015, 50-year-old Noble was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after 21 years. Noble claimed during the trial that he was just trying to scare them and was not aiming at anyone. Halloween noose accident. On September 22, 2013, Jordan Morlan spent his Sunday preparing his family's home in Fern Creek, Kentucky. Halloween was approaching, and Morlan enjoyed decorating. Born in Abilene, Texas, he was a 10th grade honor student at Fern Creek Traditional High School and a member of the junior ROTC rifle team. He loved books, was very artistic, and loved decorating for holidays. He dreamed of one day serving in the United States Marine Corps. That day, he worked on the front yard display. He had put up various Halloween decorations, including a noose hanging from a tree branch. His younger sister, Megan Kay, was nearby. Morlan decided to play a prank on her. He would pretend to hang himself from the decorative noose. It was meant to be a harmless scare, the kind of joke older siblings play on younger ones. He positioned himself beneath the rope and placed it around his neck. The plan was simple: act like he was hanging, wait for his sister to notice, then reveal the joke. Something went wrong. The noose tightened around his neck. It was not loose as he expected. The rope constricted, cutting off the flow of oxygen to his brain for 20 to 30 seconds. Megan saw him and immediately realized this was not a prank. She screamed for their mother. His mother, Ginger Rodriguez, ran outside and found him hanging from the tree. She attempted to cut him down, but was unable to remove her son from the tree. She called 911 immediately. Paramedics arrived, took him down, and transported him to University of Louisville Hospital. His brain had been deprived of oxygen. He was placed on a ventilator and slipped into a coma. Approximately 12 hours later, on the morning of September 23, 2013, around 8 o'clock, Jordan Morlan died from organ failure. Police investigated the incident and ruled his death an accident, egging chase accident. On December 2, 2006, just after midnight, Danny Crawford walked along West Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 friends. The boys carried cartons of eggs. They had spent the evening throwing them at passing vehicles, a prank common among teenagers. Car after car drove by. The boys would wait for the right moment, then hurl eggs at the targets. Most drivers simply continued on their way, annoyed but unwilling to stop. Then a Jeep Cherokee approached. The boys threw eggs. Several struck the vehicle. This driver reacted differently. The Jeep did not keep driving. Instead, it immediately turned around. The vehicle began pursuing the teenagers. The boys realized what was happening and started running. The chase continued through the neighborhood streets. Michael Shane Gross Jr. was riding as a passenger in the Jeep. The vehicle pulled ahead and stopped. Gross Jr. exited the vehicle. He began shooting at the fleeing teenagers. Crawford was still running. Bullets flew through the air. One struck Crawford. He collapsed at 28 North Terrace Avenue. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation began immediately, but the case went cold. Years passed without an arrest. The Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Homicide Unit continued working to solve the case. Detectives worked to convince witnesses to provide information. Police had located and impounded the Jeep Cherokee involved in the incident shortly after the shooting. However, the gun used in the shooting was not discovered until months later during a search of the impounded vehicle. The evidence was recovered. Michael Shane Gross Jr., 22 years old, was charged with murder and tampering with evidence. At the time of his arrest for Crawford's murder, Gross was already in jail on unrelated charges. Crawford's father, Danny Crawford, expressed relief that detectives never gave up on the case. The family could finally take a deep breath, knowing investigators had stayed with it and not let it die off. Panther prank, tragedy. On October 20th, 2021, 18-year-old Rachel Olivia Buchanan spent the evening at the home of Jake Barber and his fiancée Autumn Nichols in Henderson County, North Carolina. Buchanan's fiancé, Chris Shields Jr., was also present. During the evening, Buchanan realized she had forgotten her phone charger at the home she shared with Shields, located down the road. Buchanan asked Shields if he could retrieve the charger. Barber offered to go along for safety reasons due to local legends about a Black Panther in the area. Before leaving, both men armed themselves with firearms and walked down the road. While the men were gone, Buchanan and Nichols devised a plan to surprise them when they returned. The women gathered a dozen expired eggs and positioned themselves approximately 15 feet down an embankment. Nichols squatted close to the ground while Buchanan bent over from the waist. Nichols passed gas, causing both women to laugh quietly. As the men walked back, they heard sounds they perceived as a growl and sticks breaking. They saw a dark figure in the shadows. Perceiving a threat, both men fired multiple rounds. Buchanan was struck 3 times. One bullet grazed her forehead. Another hit her left forearm. The fatal 9mm projectile discharged from Barbara's firearm, entered her scalp, exited near her left earlobe, re-entered her upper chest, and perforated vital organs including her heart. After hearing screaming, both men immediately dropped their weapons and ran to help. They provided first aid and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Buchanan died while being transported to Pardee Hospital. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation handled the case due to a connection between a Henderson County Sheriff's Office employee and one of the parties involved. District Attorney Andrew Murray ruled the shooting a tragic accident. No charges were filed. Both men had the lawful right to possess and discharge weapons outside city limits. Blood tests confirmed no alcohol or substances were involved. Murray stated they both firmly believed the growling shadow in the darkness was a threat to their safety. Topgolf, horseplay, death. On December 21, 2021, 22-year-old Connor Groom arrived at Topgolf in Chigwell, Essex, England for his company's Christmas party. He worked as a bricklayer and was joined by several friends from work. Topgolf features multiple levels, where groups hit golf balls at targets on a driving range below, with safety nets installed between the hitting bays and the drop to the range. The group had been drinking heavily throughout the evening. After arriving around 7 in the evening, they consumed alcohol at the bar before heading to their bay on the first floor around 8. Once there, the friends began playing pranks on each other, pushing and nudging one another onto the safety nets. The behavior was seen as a joke among the group. CCTV footage reviewed by police showed at least 7 instances of pushing or attempted pushing. Groom himself had been pushed onto the netting twice and had pushed one friend as well. Topgolf staff warned the group multiple times to stop messing around. The group apologized and said they would not do it again, but the warnings were ignored. Just after 10 in the evening, Ben Gardner, Groom's best friend, who had not participated in the previous pushing, came running from behind and executed a 2-handed push on Groom. Groom's momentum carried him forward over the safety net. His foot briefly caught in the netting, causing him to lose control of his landing. He fell approximately 12 feet, landing headfirst on the driving range below. The impact caused a traumatic cervical spinal cord injury and hypoxic brain injury. Emergency services transported him to Royal London Hospital, where his condition worsened over the following weeks. On January 25th, 2022, 5 weeks after the fall, Connor Groom died. Gardner was arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm without intent, but charges were dropped after consultation with the Crown Prosecution Service and Groom's family. The family did not support prosecution. In May 2024, Essex Senior Coroner Lincoln Brooks ruled the death as misadventure, describing it as inebriated but not malicious horseplay. Following the incident, Topgolf implemented enhanced staff training, updated signage, stricter enforcement, and created a player safety manager role. Doorbell prank gone wrong. On May 3, 2025, around 3 o'clock in the morning, 18-year-old Michael Bosworth Jr. drove through a neighborhood in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, with 2 friends. Bosworth was a senior at Massaponax High School. Later that day, his school would be holding prom. He played lacrosse and football for the school. That early morning, the 3 teenagers were filming content for TikTok. They had decided to perform a ding-dong ditch prank. The concept was simple. Ring a doorbell, run away, and record the reaction. The group was not familiar with the area, but had already visited several houses in the neighborhood. They arrived at a home on Mackenzie Lane belonging to Tyler Chase Butler. According to court documents, the teenagers climbed over a 6-foot privacy fence into Butler's backyard and kicked and banged on his basement door. The group immediately fled. They ran to find hiding spots. Butler emerged from his house. He raised a firearm and fired multiple shots at the fleeing teenagers. One of the teens with Bosworth was grazed by a bullet. Bosworth was struck in the back. According to the search warrant affidavit, the teenagers stated they were running to hide when they were shot at. One teen had a video on his phone showing them performing the prank at a different home earlier that day. Butler initially told police that Bosworth and the other teenagers were trying to break into his home. The teenagers told detectives they were not breaking in to steal anything. They were just recording ding-dong ditch pranks. Michael Bosworth Jr. died that day at Mary Washington Hospital. Butler was detained for questioning but was not immediately charged. On May 6, 2025, the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office announced that Butler had been arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder, malicious wounding, and 2 counts of use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Butler is being held without bond at Rappahannock Regional Jail. Surveillance video from Butler's home captured him making threatening statements before and after the shooting. Jump scare shot. On September 5th, 2022, Labor Day morning, Dominique McCoy visited a friend's home in the 4300 block of Stubner Hill Drive in northwest Harris County, Texas. McCoy was spending time at the residence of 17-year-old Reginald Smalls. The 2 teenagers were friends. According to court documents read during a probable cause hearing, McCoy decided to play a prank on Smalls. He hid inside the bathroom of the home. He waited for the right moment. When Smalls walked past, McCoy jumped out suddenly to scare him. It was meant to be a joke, the kind friends play on each other. Smalls allegedly reacted to being startled by firing a weapon. The gunshot struck McCoy in the chest. Police responded to the home just before 10 in the morning. Officers found McCoy in the restroom with a gunshot wound. Emergency services rushed him to the hospital. He was pronounced dead. Court records showed that Smalls had no prior criminal history, including as a juvenile. After his arrest, Smalls was taken to a detention facility. While there, he allegedly assaulted a detention officer who was attempting to prevent him from tampering with a camera inside a jail cell. Smalls hit the officer and threw him to the ground. This led to an additional charge of assaulting a public servant. Smalls was charged with manslaughter in McCoy's death. A judge set his bond at $100,000 for the manslaughter charge. The bond was later raised to $150,000 total when the assault charge was added. Smalls was not present at his probable cause hearing because he had been admitted to a mental health unit for unspecified reasons. The judge stated that based upon the very dangerous nature of a 17-year-old being in possession of a firearm, the court will find a high bond is necessary in order to ensure community safety. Another friend who was present, 18-year-old Leckedrick Bowden Jr., was charged with tampering with evidence for attempting to hide the gun used in the shooting. Kanungu Church Inferno. On March 17, 2000, over 500 followers of the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God gathered in a small church in Kanungu, Uganda. They arrived wearing green robes trimmed in white, singing hymns about the end of the world. Their leaders had promised them ascension to heaven that day. Many had sold their possessions and said goodbye to relatives who hadn't joined the cult. The previous evening, the group had celebrated with a feast of roasted bulls and soft drinks. The church was unusually quiet from the outside that morning. No music played, no voices could be heard in prayer. Around 10 in the morning, residents near the church noticed something unusual. The windows and doors of the building were being boarded up and nailed shut from the outside. Shortly after, the smell of gasoline filled the air. Then came an explosion as flames erupted from the building. Witnesses reported hearing the explosion and seeing fire spread rapidly through the structure. The blaze was fed by gasoline and possibly sulfuric acid that had been poured throughout the building. Leader Dominic Katari Babo had purchased 50 liters of sulfuric acid days before. The intense heat caused the wooden boards covering the windows to burn. Inside, followers were trapped as the temperature rose and smoke filled the building. The sealed doors and windows prevented any escape. When authorities finally approached the smoldering ruins, they discovered over 500 bodies inside the structure. The cult leaders were not found among the dead. They had locked their followers inside and disappeared. Days later, police discovered mass graves at other cult properties across southern Uganda. The graves contained nearly 400 additional bodies showing signs of poisoning, stabbing, and strangulation, with some victims found with banana fibers around their necks. Police stated many had been murdered weeks before the church fire. The total death toll reached approximately 924 people, making it one of the largest mass murders in modern history. Death of the Antichrist. On September 30th, 1994, Tony and Nikki Dutoit received an invitation to dinner at a chalet in Marin Heights, Quebec, from their old friend Dominique Belleton. The couple had a 3-month-old son, Christopher Emmanuel. They were former members of the Order of the Solar Temple, a cult led by Joseph DiMambro. They had left the group after Tony revealed that DiMambro used fake holographic effects to deceive members, causing several followers to leave the cult. Around 5 in the afternoon, the Dutoits arrived at DiMambro's chalet. What they didn't know was that cult members Joel Egger and Jerry Janou were waiting inside. Upon entering, Tony was lured to the basement bathroom. Behind the door, Egger and Janou attacked him with a baseball bat, striking his head repeatedly until he lost consciousness. They then stabbed him 50 times in the back. Nikki, likely realizing what had happened to her husband, was killed next. She was stabbed 8 times in the back, 4 times in the throat, and once in each breast. The numbers held symbolic significance in the cult's rituals. She did not resist. The attackers then turned to 3-month-old Christopher Emmanuel. DiMambro had declared the infant to be the Antichrist because his parents had disobeyed DiMambro's order forbidding them from having children, and because they had named him Emmanuel, a name DiMambro had reserved exclusively for his daughter Emanuele, whom he called the Cosmic Child. The baby was stabbed 6 times with both a knife and a wooden stake through the heart. The bodies were wrapped in blankets and carpet, then hidden in a storage closet. Christopher's body was placed in a plastic bag behind a water heater. Egger and Belleton left for Switzerland that night, using the Dutois car to reach the airport. Jerry and Colette Genoux remained at the chalet, cleaning the scene and preparing for their own deaths. 4 days later, on October 4th, they set incendiary timers and died in the fire. Between October 2nd and 5th, 48 members of the cult died in Switzerland, including Egger, Belleton, and DeMambro himself. Final exit of the away team. On March 26, 1997, former Heaven's Gate member Rio D'Angelo entered a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, after receiving videotapes in the mail the previous evening. Inside, he discovered a scene so methodically arranged it seemed almost peaceful at first glance. 39 bodies lay on bunk beds and mattresses throughout the house, each covered with a purple shroud. The deceased were followers of Marshall Applewhite, a charismatic former music teacher who called himself Do. He had convinced his followers they were aliens temporarily inhabiting human bodies. For months, they had been preparing for what Applewhite called Graduation Day, the moment when they would leave their human containers and board a spacecraft supposedly hidden behind the Hale-Bopp comet. On March 21st, 5 days before their deaths, the members ate a last meal together at Marie Callender's restaurant in Carlsbad. They recorded farewell videos explaining their decision with calm certainty. Then, beginning March 24th, they started their carefully choreographed departure in 3 waves. First 15 members assisted by 8 helpers, then another 15 also assisted by 8 members, and finally the last 9 helping each other. Each member packed a small bag as if for a journey. They put on identical black shirts, sweatpants, and brand new Nike Decade sneakers. Around their arms, they wore patches that read Heaven's Gate Away Team. The method was precise. Those going first would ingest applesauce or pudding mixed with phenobarbital and hydrocodone, followed by vodka to accelerate the drug's effects. Other members would then place plastic bags over their heads to ensure death from lack of oxygen, then cover them with the purple shrouds. After attending to their companions, the next group would repeat the process. Applewhite died on the 3rd day, the 3rd to last member. By morning on March 26th, all 39 were gone. Their bodies were arranged neatly, hands at sides, each with a $5 bill and 3 quarters in their pocket. Toll money, they believed, for their cosmic journey. Fatal beating. In March 1981, Samuel Jagger woke up in the commune in Quebec's Gaspé Peninsula. The toddler had no way of knowing it would be his last day alive. The commune was ruled by Roche Thériault, a self-proclaimed prophet who called himself Moses. Thériault maintained control through fear, violence, and claims of divine authority. That evening, Thériault was celebrating with other members, having convinced his 2 oldest sons to join the commune. Samuel and other children were left in the care of Guy Veer, a 23-year-old who had recently joined the group from a psychiatric hospital. Samuel was cold and hungry, and his crying kept Veer from sleeping. Veer snapped. The other commune members, including Samuel's parents, were with Thériault. When they returned, they found that Samuel had been badly beaten. The toddler cried out, his small body marked by the assault. His pleas went unanswered. The commune members had learned that intervention meant becoming the next target. After the beating, Samuel could not pass urine. Thériault decided to perform surgery on the child. Without anesthesia or medical training, he sliced open Samuel's genitals with scissors and performed a crude circumcision. He also gave the boy stomach injections as part of a healing ritual. The procedures led to infection. The next day, Samuel Jagger was dead. His small body, damaged by both the beating and Thériault's surgical intervention, could endure no more. The commune set the boy's body on fire before burying it on the grounds. Thériault blamed Veer entirely, and later held a kangaroo court that found him not guilty by reason of insanity. Despite this verdict, Thériault still deemed him guilty. As punishment, Thériault castrated Veer. Months later, Veer fled the commune and contacted police, revealing Samuel's death. Authorities raided the commune in December 1981, removing all children and arresting multiple members. Thériault and 6 others were convicted of criminal negligence causing bodily harm, and received sentences ranging from 9 months to 2 years. Years later, in 1993, Thériault was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of another follower. Crude surgery. On September 28, 1988, at the Ant Hill Kids Commune in Ontario, Canada, 32-year-old Solange Boilard complained of abdominal pain. Boilard was a devoted follower of Roche Thériault, the self-proclaimed prophet who demanded absolute obedience. When she reported her discomfort to Thériault, he gathered the commune members and announced he would perform surgery to cure her. Thériault had no medical training, but he regularly performed amateur procedures on his followers. That night, he ordered Boilard onto a table and stripped her naked. The other commune members were instructed to hold her down. No anesthesia was provided, no sterilization was attempted. Theriault first stuffed a cloth into her throat, then punched her repeatedly in the stomach before forcing a plastic tube into her rectum to perform a crude enema with molasses and olive oil. With the first incision across her abdomen, the pain was immediate and overwhelming. The cut exposed her internal organs. Blood poured from the wound, soaking through the table and onto the floor below. Boilard remained conscious as shock began to set in, the knife penetrating deeper layers of tissue. Theriault reached his bare hand into the incision. Her body convulsed as he grasped a section of her intestines. With force, Theriault tore out a portion of her small intestine. He then ordered another follower, Gabrielle Lavallée, to stitch the wound closed with needle and thread. Other women inserted a tube down Boilard's throat and blew into it. Boilard remained conscious through the ordeal. Her breathing became shallow as her body began shutting down. Digestive chemicals leaked into her abdominal cavity. By the next day, Solange Boilard was dead. What happened next was documented in court submissions. Claiming he could resurrect her, Theriault drilled a hole into her skull and ejaculated into the opening. He ordered other male followers to do the same. When she didn't return to life, he removed one of her ribs to wear as a trophy before ordering her body buried on the commune grounds. Waco Compound Fire. On April 19, 1993, the 51-day standoff between federal agents and the Branch Davidians near Waco, Texas, entered its final phase. Inside the compound, approximately 80 people, including at least 20 children, remained loyal to their leader, David Koresh. Shortly after 6 in the morning, FBI agents used tanks to begin breaching the walls of the compound, inserting CS gas through extended booms. The tear gas immediately began to affect those inside. Adults covered their faces with wet cloths, but the protection was minimal. The gas made breathing increasingly difficult as approximately 400 canisters were deployed into every room and hallway over several hours. The winds that morning reached 30 to 35 miles per hour, conditions that would later prove catastrophic. Around noon, fires erupted simultaneously in 3 different locations within the compound. The flames spread rapidly through the wooden structure, accelerated by the high winds. Inside, those on the upper floors faced a deadly situation. The tanks had destroyed interior staircases during the gas assault, trapping many on the second floor with no way down. Some members were overcome by smoke before they could escape. Others, weakened by hours of gas exposure, couldn't navigate through the burning building. Many died from smoke inhalation as toxic fumes filled the structure. Those who survived longer faced extreme heat as the flames consumed everything around them. As the fire spread, at least 20 people died from gunshot wounds, including several children. Medical examiners later concluded these were likely mercy killings by those trapped inside with no escape from the flames. One 3-year-old child was stabbed in the chest. Koresh himself died from a gunshot wound to the forehead, though his body was too badly burned to determine whether it was self-inflicted or inflicted by another. 9 people managed to escape the inferno. By the time firefighters were allowed to approach 15 minutes after the fire started, the compound had collapsed in on itself. Investigators ultimately recovered 76 bodies from the ruins, including 25 children. The flames had consumed everything, leaving only devastation and unanswered questions about the final moments inside. Kidnapped and sacrificed. On March 14, 1989, 21-year-old Mark Kilroy was enjoying spring break in Matamoros, Mexico. The pre-med student from the University of Texas had crossed the border with friends for a night of celebration. In the early morning hours, Kilroy became separated from his group near a bar. Witnesses later reported seeing him approached by men who lured him toward a vehicle. Kilroy was never seen alive again. Unknown to Kilroy, he had been targeted by members of a drug smuggling cult led by Adolfo Constanzo, who practiced a distorted version of Palo Mayombe, an Afro-Caribbean religion. Constanzo, 26, believed human sacrifices gave him and his followers magical protection from law enforcement. The group operated from a ranch called Rancho Santa Elena, just outside the city. Constanzo had specifically ordered his men to find an American college student for sacrifice. At the ranch, Kilroy was held for approximately 12 hours. Throughout the night of March 15th, cult members tortured and sodomized him. At some point during his captivity, Kilroy attempted to escape, but was recaptured. After hours of abuse, Constanzo led Kilroy to a field. There, he killed him with a machete blow to the back of the neck. Following Kilroy's death, Constanzo removed his brain and boiled it in nganga, the ceremonial cauldron central to their rituals. The brain was found later by investigators inside the iron pot, mixed with the animal remains, herbs, and blood. Cult members believed consuming or using parts of their victims would grant them supernatural powers. Constanzo also had Kilroy's legs severed above the knees to facilitate burial. A wire was inserted through his spinal column so the bones could be easily retrieved after decomposition for use as ritual talismans. On April 11th, nearly 1 month month after Kilroy's disappearance, police discovered his remains at the ranch along with 14 other victims. Most were rival drug dealers, though some were random abductees. When authorities closed in on Constanzo's Mexico City apartment on May 6th, he fired at police with a machine gun. Rather than surrender, Constanzo ordered his follower Alvaro de Leon to shoot him and his companion Martin Quintana, dying before capture. Silencing of a witness. On January 17, 2025, 82-year-old Curtis Lind was outside his property in Vallejo, California. The elderly landlord moved slowly due to his age and injuries sustained approximately 2 years earlier. In November 2022, Lind had been attacked by members of the Zizians, a little-known group that operated from one of his rental properties. That attack had left him partially blinded and seriously wounded after being impaled with a samurai sword. Lind had survived against all odds and was scheduled to testify against his attackers in court that April. His testimony was expected to be the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Prosecutors alleged the killing was motivated by preventing his testimony. Around 2:30 that afternoon, a figure approached Lind's gated property on Lemon Street. Workers at nearby body shops witnessed what happened next. Standing there was someone Lind didn't recognize, a young man wearing all black with long black hair and a mask. Maximilian Snyder, a 22-year-old data scientist, prosecutors allege, came with intent to kill Lind. According to witnesses, the attacker approached Lind and wrapped an arm around his neck in what appeared to be a friendly greeting. Then he pulled out a long knife and repeatedly stabbed Lind in the chest. Witnesses watched as Lind opened his shirt buttons to reveal blood. The assailant ran down the street. Workers at a nearby auto body shop saw the blood-covered man flee past their business. They took cover, knowing he was armed. But then the attacker returned to the scene. He walked back to where Lind lay bleeding on the sidewalk and slashed his throat. Emergency responders arrived and transported Lind to a local hospital. Despite the efforts of medical staff, he succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead. Snyder fled but was arrested 7 days later in Redding, California. He was charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances and faces the possibility of the death penalty. He has pleaded not guilty and awaits trial. Strychnine street trap. Ellen Donworth was 19 years old on the night of October 13th. 1891. She worked the streets of Lambeth in London, trying to survive in a city that offered few choices to women in her position. That evening, she encountered Dr. Thomas Neal Cream, a man who had already served time in an Illinois prison for poisoning another victim with strychnine. Cream offered her a drink from a bottle. She accepted it without suspicion. The bottle contained strychnine, a deadly poison extracted from the seeds of the Strychnos nux vomica tree, a plant native to India and Southeast Asia. She drank from the bottle and walked away. The next day, October 14th, Ellen became severely ill. Strychnine attacks the nervous system, blocking the signals that normally prevent muscles from contracting all at once. There is no antidote. The poison causes violent convulsions. Witnesses described her suffering intense muscle spasms. Strychnine produces a condition called opisthotonos, where the back arches violently during convulsions. The victim remains conscious throughout the ordeal. Each spasm contracts every muscle in the body simultaneously. The jaw locks shut, making breathing difficult. Ellen Donworth died on October 16th, 1891. 3 days after consuming the poison. Her body had endured relentless waves of convulsions before finally giving out. Thomas Neal Cream had been released from Joliet Prison in Illinois just months earlier, in July 1891, after serving 10 years for murdering Daniel Stott with strychnine. Within weeks of arriving in London, he had already killed again. A week after Donworth's death, another woman, Matilda Clover, died under similar circumstances. Cream's compulsion to draw attention to his crimes proved his undoing. He wrote anonymous letters to the coroner offering to name Ellen Donworth's murderer in exchange for money. He attempted to blackmail prominent citizens, accusing them of the murders. These bizarre actions eventually led investigators directly to him. He was arrested in June 1892 and charged with multiple murders. His trial lasted from October 17th to 21st, 1892. The jury deliberated for only 12 minutes before finding him guilty. Thomas Neal Cream was hanged at Newgate Prison on November 15th, 1892. According to the hangman, his last words were, "I am Jack the..." Though he had been incarcerated in Illinois during the Ripper murders of 1888. Sorrel Soup suspicion. Alexander Perepelichny was a wealthy Russian businessman who had fled to England after exposing a massive fraud scheme in his home country. On November 10th, 2012, he returned to his home in Surrey after a trip to Paris. He was 44 years old, physically fit, and showed no signs of illness. That same day, he went for a jog along the quiet roads near his estate in St. George's Hill. He was alone. Halfway through his run, he collapsed. Neighbors found him lying on the pavement. He was not moving. moving. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but he was already dead. The sudden death of a healthy man raised immediate suspicions. An initial autopsy found no obvious cause of death. Police initially treated it as non-suspicious, but Perforations was not an ordinary businessman. He had been working with Hermitage Capital Management, providing evidence about a $230 million fraud that implicated Russian officials and mafia figures. He had received death threats. His name appeared on a hit list discovered when Chechen assassins were arrested in France. His life insurance company, Legal & General, hired additional experts to investigate. In 2014, a scientist from the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew testified that she had found traces of a substance in his stomach that matched the atomic weight of Gelsemium elegans, a rare and deadly plant toxin. The plant is native to China and known by a chilling name, heartbreak grass. Gelsemium contains gelsamine, a powerful alkaloid. It was suggested that the toxin could have been in food he consumed, possibly sorrel soup, though no evidence confirmed this. The poison attacks the respiratory system, paralyzing the muscles that control breathing while leaving the brain conscious. However, the case became mired in controversy. Police had thrown away most of Perforations' stomach contents shortly after his death, severely limiting toxicology testing. Computer evidence detailing threats and business deals went missing from police custody. Further testing could not definitively confirm that the substance was gelsemium or any known toxin. In December 2018, after a lengthy inquest, the coroner ruled that Perforations, more likely than not, died of natural causes, possibly sudden cardiac arrest. The possibility of poisoning cannot be completely excluded, the coroner stated, but there was insufficient evidence to prove unlawful killing. United States intelligence agencies reportedly believed he was assassinated on orders from the Kremlin, but British authorities could not prove it. Milk sickness tragedy. Lincoln lived on the Indiana frontier with her husband Thomas and their 2 children. She was 34 years old in the autumn of 1818. Life on the frontier was hard, but families like hers had learned to survive on what the land provided. That included milk from their cow. In early October, several families in the Little Pigeon Creek settlement became desperately ill with a mysterious condition. Nancy's aunt and uncle, Elizabeth and Thomas Sparrow, who had raised her, fell sick in September and died. Their nephew Dennis Hanks moved in with the Lincolns. Then Nancy herself became ill. Neighbors recognized the symptoms. They called it the tremors, or milk sickness. The illness was mysterious and terrifying because no one understood what caused it. What settlers did not know was that their cows had been grazing on white snakeroot, a small plant with delicate white flowers that grew wild throughout the region. The plant contains trematol, a potent toxin that accumulates in the tissues of animals that eat it. When those animals produce milk, the poison passes directly into it. The symptoms of milk sickness included trembling, weakness, intense abdominal pain, and violent vomiting. The illness could progress rapidly or linger for days. Frontier medicine had no treatment and no understanding of the cause. Nancy Hanks Lincoln died on October 5, 1818. Her 9-year-old son, Abraham, and 11-year-old daughter, Sarah, were with her during her final illness. Abraham helped his father make her coffin, whittling the wooden pegs that held the planks together. She was buried in what is now called the Nancy Hanks Lincoln Cemetery, part of the Lincoln Boyhood National Memorial in present-day Lincoln City, Indiana. Some historians have questioned whether Nancy Lincoln actually died of milk sickness or of tuberculosis, which was also called consumption and was common at the time. Her law partner turned biographer William Herndon noted in 1870 that some said she died with the milk sickness, some with a galloping quick consumption. The exact symptoms of her final illness were not well documented. Thousands of pioneers died from milk sickness in the early 19th century. It would be years before the connection to white snakeroot was proven. A frontier woman named Anna Pierce Hobbs Bixby, helped by knowledge from a Shawnee woman, eventually demonstrated that the plant caused the illness. Carrot juice overdose. Basil Brown was a 48-year-old health food advocate living in Croydon, England, and in 1974. He had become obsessed with natural remedies, convinced that large amounts of vitamins could prevent illness and improve health. He believed that carrots, rich in vitamin A, would benefit him greatly. So he began drinking carrot juice in massive quantities. Over approximately 10 days, Brown consumed around 10 gallons of carrot juice. He also took concentrated vitamin A supplements, ingesting an estimated 70 million units of the vitamin during this period. For the first several days, Brown felt fine. There was no immediate warning that anything was wrong. Carrots and vitamins were healthy. Everyone knew that. What he did not understand was that vitamin A is fat soluble, meaning the body stores it in the liver rather than flushing it out through urine like water-soluble vitamins. With each passing day, the vitamin accumulated in his liver. The organ that normally processes toxins was now drowning in a substance supplements it could not eliminate fast enough. Hypervitaminosis A was destroying him from the inside. Then his skin began to change. It turned yellow at first, then deepened into a bright orange color due to carotene buildup. The plant pigment had exceeded his body's capacity to process it. But Brown did not stop. He believed the treatment was working. The nausea started. His abdomen began to ache. He felt increasingly weak and confused. His liver was failing, unable to process the overwhelming load of vitamin A. Cirrhosis developed as healthy liver tissue turned to scar tissue. Basil Brown died in February 1974. An autopsy revealed that his liver had been ravaged by vitamin A toxicity. The damage was comparable to that found in chronic alcoholics. His skin remained a shocking shade of orange. The coroner's inquest returned a verdict of death from carrot juice addiction. Medical professionals determined that while the carrot juice contributed significantly to his vitamin A intake, the concentrated supplements he was taking were the primary cause of the fatal overdose. Brown had poisoned himself with something he consumed to heal himself, demonstrating that even natural substances essential for health can become deadly killers when consumed in extreme excess. His death remains one of the most unusual cautionary tales in medical history. Wild potato starvation. Christopher McCandless was 24 years old when he walked into the Alaskan wilderness in April of 1992. He carried minimal supplies and a book on edible plants. His goal was to live off the land in complete isolation. He found an abandoned bus, Fairbanks Bus 142, along the Stampede Trail and made it his shelter. For months, he survived by hunting small game and gathering plants. One of his food sources was the wild potato plant, known scientifically as Hedysarum alpinum. The roots were safe to eat and had sustained him for weeks. He documented his meals and activities in a diary written in the margins of a book on Alaskan plants. On July 14, 1992, as summer advanced and the roots became tough and unpalatable, McCandless began eating the seeds of the plant as well. He photographed a bag full of the seeds. Indigenous Alaskans did not eat these seeds, even during food shortages, but McCandless's plant guide did not warn against them. On July 30th, he wrote an alarming entry in his diary. Extremely weak, fault of potato seed. Much trouble just to stand up, starving, great jeopardy. Before this entry, his diary showed he was managing adequately. After this date, his condition deteriorated rapidly. He became too weak to hunt or forage effectively. The Teclanica River, which he had crossed easily in April, was now swollen with summer meltwater blocking his route back to civilization. 20 days later, in mid-August, Christopher McCandless died inside his sleeping bag in the abandoned bus. Moose hunters discovered his body on September 6, 1992. He weighed only 67 pounds. The official cause of death was starvation. The role of the wild potato seeds in his death has been debated for decades. Author John Krakauer theorized that the seeds contained a neurotoxin. In 2013, laboratory analysis found the seeds contained L-canavanine, and later testing suggested the presence of ODAP, a neurotoxin that can cause latherism, a condition involving paralysis of the legs. However, these findings remain scientifically controversial. Some chemists found no toxins in the seeds. Others argue that any toxic effects would require prolonged consumption, and that McCandless simply starved because he could not acquire enough calories. The Alaskan coroner's report listed starvation as the cause of death. Whether the seeds poisoned him, weakened him, or played no role at all continues to be disputed. What is certain is that McCandless died in that bus, his body consumed by starvation while his mind remained sharp enough to write his final messages. Nicotine extraction. Gustave Fournier arrived at his brother-in-law's castle in Belgium on the evening of November 20th, 1850. Count Hippolyte Vizard de Beaucarmé had invited him to Chateau de Bitremont for dinner. Fournier had no reason to suspect danger. The Count seemed welcoming. His wife, Fournier's sister Lydie, greeted him. What Fournier did not know was that the Count had spent months in his private laboratory extracting pure nicotine from tobacco leaves. The Count was deeply in debt. Fournier had recently inherited the family fortune, and worse for the Count's plans, had just announced his intention to marry. If Fournier died unmarried, the Count stood to inherit a substantial sum. Dinner began. According to evidence presented at trial, Fournier was forcibly made to consume liquid nicotine. The exact details of the struggle were reconstructed from evidence at the scene and testimony during the trial. The reaction was immediate and violent. Pure nicotine is one of the most toxic, naturally occurring substances. The liquid burned his mouth and throat. Nicotine entered his bloodstream within seconds, attacking his nervous system. His body began convulsing. Every muscle contracted. His heart raced erratically. Within minutes, Gustave Fournier was dead. The Count tried to clean the scene, but investigators noticed chemical burns in the victim's mouth and suspicious pierce marks on his body. An autopsy revealed he had been forced to swallow a poisonous and corrosive substance. The well-known Belgian chemist Jean Servais Stas was called in to conduct a toxicological examination. Stas worked for 3 months developing a groundbreaking method to extract and identify the poison from the victim's preserved organs. Using ether, acetic acid, and ethanol, he successfully isolated nicotine from Fourni's tissues. This was the first time in history that a plant alkaloid had been successfully detected in a corpse, revolutionizing forensic science. During the trial, the Count and Countess blamed each other. Evidence emerged that the Count had been experimenting with nicotine for some time. Dead farm animals were found on the estate, apparently used to test the poison's effectiveness. Count Hippolyte Vizard de Beaucarmé was convicted of murder. He was executed by guillotine in Mons, Belgium on July 19, 1851. The case became famous not because of the murder itself, but because it established that plant poisons could be definitively proven in forensic investigations. The Stas-Otto method, based on his pioneering work, remains fundamental to toxicology today. Actor's camping tragedy. Andre Noble was a 25-year-old Canadian actor who had just appeared in his first starring role in the film Sugar. On July 30th, 2004, he was camping with family near his hometown in Newfoundland, taking a break from promoting the film. That afternoon, he joined family members on a boat trip to Fair Island, a small island near Centerville. During the excursion, the group explored the island's foliage. Noble, a vegetarian known for his love of nature, encountered a plant with distinctive purple-blue flowers. It was monkshood, also known as wolfsbane, one of the most poisonous plants in North America. At some point, Noble came into contact with the plant. Family members later believed he either ingested part of it or touched his mouth after handling it. He returned to his aunt's cabin feeling normal initially. There were no immediate symptoms, but inside his body, aconitine, the plant's deadly alkaloid, was already spreading through his bloodstream. Aconitine attacks both the heart and nervous system simultaneously. Within hours, Noble began to feel ill. The burning sensation that characterizes aconitine poisoning likely began in his mouth and throat. Aconitine disrupts the electrical signals that keep the heart beating steadily, causing dangerous arrhythmias. His heart rhythm became irregular, and he fell severely ill at his aunt's cabin. They rushed him toward the hospital, but his young body could not withstand the poison's assault on his cardiovascular system. Andre Noble died en route to the hospital before medical treatment could be administered. He was 25 years old. Initial reports did not immediately identify the cause of death. Family and friends suspected monkshood poisoning based on where he had been and his symptoms, but the actual cause took several days to confirm. Final toxicology tests revealed aconitine poisoning. Noble had been considered a rising star. Born in Centerville, Newfoundland, he had studied acting at Sir Wilfrid Grenfell College and moved to Toronto in 2001 to pursue his career. He appeared in several Canadian television productions and co-founded a theater group called The Young Company. Sugar, his final film, had just premiered at film festivals weeks before his death. Monkshood contains aconitine throughout the entire plant: roots, leaves, stems, and flowers. Even small amounts can be lethal. The plant has been used historically as a poison on arrows and weapons. While popular with gardeners for its beautiful blooms, it must be handled with extreme care. Noble's death served as a tragic reminder that many ornamental plants harbor deadly toxins. Meadow saffron tea. Mrs. Maria Soames was a widow living in London in 1856. She had taken ill and hired Catherine Wilson as her nurse and companion. Wilson seemed devoted, caring for her patient with apparent tenderness. Mrs. Soames trusted her completely. She had no idea that Wilson was suspected of having poisoned several people before her. Mrs. Soames owned a house in Bloomsbury, and Wilson had been lodging there with her partner, James Dixon. In June 1856, Dixon died suddenly after a brief illness. Despite being under a doctor's care, Wilson had admitted to treating him with colchicum, claiming it was for his health. The doctor suspected something was wrong and recommended an autopsy, but Wilson persuaded him not to perform one. On the morning of October 16, 1856, Mrs. Soames complained of feeling unwell. Over the following days, she suffered from violent vomiting and intense abdominal pain. Police later believed Wilson had been administering colchicum, commonly known as meadow saffron or autumn crocus, to her patient over a period of time, likely mixed into tea or other beverages. Colchicum contains colchicine, a toxin that attacks cells throughout the body, particularly in the digestive tract. The symptoms mimic cholera, severe vomiting, abdominal cramping, and progressive organ failure. Unlike many poisons, colchicine does not dull consciousness. Mrs. Soames remained aware as her body systematically shut down. Mrs. Soames died on October 18, 1856. 26, after 2 days of suffering. Wilson claimed she had committed suicide, distraught over financial matters. The death was initially attributed to natural causes. 6 years later, in 1862, Wilson was arrested for attempting to poison another patient, Sarah Carnell, with sulfuric acid. During the investigation, police discovered a pattern of suspicious deaths among Wilson's patients and companions. Authorities ordered the exhumation of several bodies, including Mrs. Soames. Forensic examination was conducted by toxicologist Alfred Swain Taylor. Although 6 years had passed and much evidence was degraded, Taylor testified that the symptoms were consistent with colchicine poisoning. Nearly all of Wilson's victims had suffered from gout and had access to colchicum for medicinal purposes, which gave Wilson both means and opportunity. Catherine Wilson was tried on September 25, 1862, before Justice Biles. The judge told the jury, "Gentlemen, if such a state of things as this were allowed to exist, no living person could sit down to a meal in safety." Wilson was found guilty and sentenced to death. Evidence suggested she had killed at least 7 people for small inheritances, though she was convicted of only 1 murder. Catherine Wilson was hanged in front of Newgate Prison on October 20th, 1862, before a crowd of 20,000 spectators. She was the last woman publicly executed in London. The judge privately called her the greatest criminal that ever lived. Hippo in Free State. In 2005, a South African Army major and farmer named Marius Els rescued a 5-month-old hippopotamus calf from a flood on the Vaal River. He named the animal Humphrey. He brought it to his 400-acre farm in Free State Province and raised it as his own. For 6 years, Els rode Humphrey on his back. He hand-fed him apples. He told anyone who would listen that the animal was like a son to him. "I trust him with my heart that he will not harm anybody," he said. Friends and neighbors had a different view. Humphrey had killed calves belonging to Els's business partner. He had broken out of his enclosure and chased golfers off a nearby course. On one occasion, a 52-year-old man and a 7-year-old boy had to climb into a tree and wait for 2 hours while the animal circled below. Elsa's wife, Louise, had expressed her concerns repeatedly. Els dismissed every warning. On November 12, 2011, Marius Els was found dead in the Vaal River. Netcare 911 spokesman Jeffrey Wicks confirmed that paramedics responded to find the man had been bitten multiple times by the animal. He had also been submerged in the water for an unknown length of time. The location was the same river from which Els had rescued the calf 6 years earlier. There were no witnesses to the attack itself. No one saw how it began. What investigators found was a 40-year-old man in the water, with the marks of his pet's teeth across his body. Marius Els was confirmed dead at the scene. Bear in the cage. Kellyanne Waltz had kept her black bear, Teddy, for 9 years. She raised him from a cub at her home in Ross Township, Pennsylvania, about 30 miles northeast of Allentown. Their property also housed a mountain lion and a tiger. On the evening of October 4th, 2009, Waltz entered Teddy's cage to clean it. The enclosure was 15 feet by 15 feet, steel and concrete. Her routine was always the same. She would throw a shovelful of dog food to one end of the cage to distract the bear while she cleaned the other. She had done it that way hundreds of times. Her neighbor Scott Castone, a school teacher, described it simply. "She's done it 1,000 times," he said, "and on 1,001, something happened. The 350-pound bear turned on her." Her 2 young children and the children from the neighboring house witnessed the attack from roughly a football field away. They ran for help. By the time Castone arrived with a handgun, the bear was on top of walls. As Castone approached, the animal climbed off her and moved toward him. Castone fired and killed it. "I did what anyone would do," he said. It was pretty much self-defense. Kellyanne Waltz was pronounced dead at the scene. Python in the crib. In the early morning hours of July 1st, 2009, the family's pet Burmese python named Gypsy escaped from its enclosure in a house in Oxford, Florida, and slithered into the bedroom where 2-year-old Shayona Hare was sleeping. The aquarium was secured by a safety-pinned quilt. No proper lid. The snake had already escaped from its container multiple times in the weeks before. Gypsy was 8 feet and 6 inches long. She was malnourished. A snake expert testified at trial that she had not been fed in over a month and weighed 13.5 pounds. A python of her age and size should have weighed approximately 140 pounds. A starving 8-foot constrictor found a sleeping 2-year-old child in a crib. Charles Jason Darnell, the mother's boyfriend and the snake's caretaker, discovered Gypsy was missing from her tank. He went to the child's room and found the snake on the girl with bite marks on her head. He stabbed the snake repeatedly until he could pull it free. Shayona Hare was already dead. The autopsy confirmed cause of death as asphyxiation. Both Jaron Hare, the child's 21-year-old mother, and Darnell, 34, were convicted of third-degree murder, manslaughter, and child neglect. Each was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Prosecutor Pete Magrino stated in court that the death was totally preventable. bird breeder Alachua. On the morning of April 12, 2019, 75-year-old Marvin Hajos was working on his farm in Alachua, Florida, northwest of Gainesville. He bred cassowary birds, enormous flightless animals native to Australia and New Guinea that the San Diego Zoo calls the most dangerous bird in the world. Cassowaries stand over 6 feet tall. They weigh up to 130 pounds. Each foot carries a 4-inch dagger-like claw capable of severing arteries with a single kick. Hajos fell near a fenced area where one of the birds was kept. The cassowary attacked him. At approximately 10 a.m., Hajos called 911 himself. His voice was weak. He gave his address to the dispatcher and said, "Would you send an ambulance, please?" An employee at the scene had no doubt about what had happened. He told the dispatcher, "I'm sure he got kicked by the cassowary." Paramedics treated Hajos at the scene for 12 minutes before transport to UF Health Shands Hospital. In the ambulance, his pulse briefly surged as responders applied chest compressions. 5 minutes before arrival, it stopped. It restarted briefly at the hospital. He died shortly after. The autopsy confirmed more than a dozen lacerations across his face, neck, back, abdomen, thighs, legs, and right arm. His brachial artery, the major blood vessel of the upper arm, had been severed. Death investigator Bill Grotjan confirmed it was an accidental death, most likely from injuries sustained from the bird. This had nothing to do with his heart conditions. Per his last wishes, the bird was sold at auction. Hogs on the farm. On the morning of September 26, 2012, 69-year-old Terry Vance Garner left the house near Riverton, Oregon, to feed his hogs. He went out at approximately 7:30 in the morning. He did not come back. Several hours later, a family member went looking for him. What the relative found in the hog enclosure stopped the search. His dentures were on the ground. Nearby were his hat, his pocket knife, his cigarettes, and scattered pieces of his body. Most of his remains had been consumed. Several of his hogs weighed 700 pounds. Coos County District Attorney Paul Frazier confirmed the discovery to reporters. "For all we know, it was a horrific accident," Frazier said. "But it's so doggone weird that we have to look at all possibilities." A forensic pathologist examined what remained. It was not enough. The pathologist could not determine the cause or manner of death. The remains were transferred to a forensic anthropologist at the University of Oregon. Investigators noted 2 possibilities. Garner may have suffered a medical event such as a heart attack and collapsed in the enclosure, or the animals may have knocked him down. One of the large sows had bitten him the previous year when he accidentally stepped on a piglet. His brother said Garner had chosen not to kill the animal. The official cause of death was listed as undetermined. Terry Vance Garner, a Vietnam War veteran, was confirmed dead. What exactly happened in that enclosure on the morning of September 26, 2012, was never established. Birthday Camel, Australia. For her 60th birthday in 2007, Pam Weaver's husband Noel gave her a camel. The family raised sheep and cattle on their property near Mitchell, Queensland, Australia. The camel was young, only 10 months old, and hand-reared. It weighed approximately 330 pounds. Less than 12 months later, Pam Weaver was dead. Her daughter and husband found her in the paddock. The camel had knocked her to the ground and laid on top of her. She had a footprint on the side of her face, another on her arm. Detective Senior Constable Craig Gregory was among the first to the scene. "I'd say it's probably been playing," he said, "or it may even be a sexual sort of thing." Camel expert Patty McHugh agreed with that assessment. "What happened is certainly characteristic of a bull in season," he said. The behavior had been building. In the weeks before the attack, the camel had repeatedly knocked over and straddled the family's pet goat. It had been chased off the animal multiple times. Police confirmed Pam Weaver died from crushing injuries caused by the animal. Investigators were awaiting a full autopsy at the time of their initial reports. She had been given the camel as a gift. She had raised it herself. It was less than a year old, and she had owned it for less than 12 months when it killed her. Wolfpack, Pennsylvania. Sandra Piovesan had been raising wolf dog hybrids at her home in Salem Township, Pennsylvania, for years. By 2006, she had 9 of them. They lived in an outdoor enclosure 40 feet by 150 feet in her backyard. She told her neighbor the animals gave her unqualified love. She built them a playground. She fed them roadkill. She described herself as the leader of the pack. Humane Officer Elaine Gower had visited the property multiple times and warned her repeatedly. Everybody told her this would happen, but she just wouldn't listen, Gower later told reporters. She was a very likable person, but she was just delusional about their danger and totally misguided. Gower had noted for years that the enclosure was far too small. Experts stated animals like these required 50 to 100 square miles of roaming territory. Piovesan had them in roughly 1/10 of an acre. A year before her death, the animals had turned on one of the older pack members and killed it. Piovesan had come to work with a bandaged arm after being attacked by one of the animals. She kept working with them. On July 17, 2006, her daughter found her body inside the enclosure. She had been mauled. The autopsy, performed by Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, confirmed multiple soft tissue injuries, with the most severe wounds to her scalp and legs. Sandra Piovesan, 50 years old, bled to death inside the pen with her animals. All 9 wolf dogs were tranquilized and euthanized. Tiger at Sandstone. Cynthia Lee Gamble had spent years working with tigers. She was 52 years old and operated the Center for Endangered Cats, a USDA licensed breeding facility on an 80-acre property near Sandstone, Minnesota, about 85 miles north of St. Paul. She had raised, trained, and exhibited the animals for over a decade. She had filmed wildlife documentaries and coordinated animals for major motion pictures. Her neighbors had never had a problem with the operation. The sheriff's office had no prior call history at the property. On April 6, 2006, a man who had come to the property to do a controlled burn found her body. Cynthia Gamble was dead inside an area connected to her 500-pound Bengal tiger's cage by a small open gate. The animal, named Tango, was still in the vicinity, agitated. A veterinarian tranquilized and then euthanized Tango to allow access to the body. Pine County Sheriff Mark Mansevich stated there was no doubt the tiger was responsible. The University of Minnesota veterinary examination of Tango determined the animal was severely emaciated, weighing 118 kilograms, roughly half of what a tiger his age should weigh. A trapdoor designed to separate Tango from the cleaning area had either been left open or had malfunctioned. Investigators were unable to determine which. Pine County Sheriff Mansevich described the scene at the property as one of the worst things he had ever come across. Cynthia Lee Gamble was confirmed dead on scene. 2 other Bengal tigers on the property survived. The extreme racer fatality. On April 29, 2007, Legoland Billund in Denmark was operating as it had for decades. The park, built in 1968, was the original Legoland, a sprawling wonderland of plastic brick structures and family-friendly attractions. Among its many rides were several roller coasters that twisted through brightly colored Lego scenery. That afternoon, a 21-year-old female employee was working her shift near one of these attractions. Her name was never released to the public by Danish authorities. At some point during operating hours, a guest riding a roller coaster lost their wallet. It fell from their pocket and landed near the tracks, just beyond the reach of anyone standing in the normal visitor areas. The guest approached the employee and explained the situation. She made a decision. Rather than following protocol, which would have required stopping the ride and waiting for trained personnel to retrieve the item, she climbed over the security fence. The barrier was there for a reason. It marked the boundary between the safe zone and the restricted area where the coaster cars moved along the track. She entered the track zone while the ride was still operating. Passengers were seated in the cars. The coaster was moving. One of the cars struck her directly in the head. The blunt force trauma was fatal. She collapsed. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The park opened as usual the following day, though the roller coaster involved remained closed as police began their investigation. Legoland manager Henrik Herman told reporters the park was shocked by the tragedy, stating that nothing like this had happened before. Police confirmed that she had climbed over a security fence to enter the restricted zone while the ride was operational. The security fence had been there to protect employees and guests from the moving ride vehicles, but she had chosen to cross it to retrieve the wallet. The choking death of Ashan Bilal. On September 24, 2016, 3-year-old Ashan Bilal was playing at home in Harper Street, Oldham, England. His mother, Sumreen Kassar, had just fed him and his 7-year-old brother, Ayan, breakfast. She went upstairs to get ready. The 2 boys were downstairs playing with toys. Among them were small plastic building blocks, the kind found in nearly every home with young children. The pieces were colorful, interlocking, and small enough to fit in a child's hand. They were also small enough to fit in a child's mouth. At around 11 o'clock that morning, Ishan picked up a piece from a Lego toy car. It was approximately 3 centimeters long. He put it in his mouth. His brother Ayan saw what happened. A scream was heard. Sumreen ran down immediately. When she reached the room, Ishan's face had turned pale, and his lips were purple. Ayan told her that Ishan was choking on a toy. She tried slapping his back, but it did not work. She called out to her husband Bilal to phone for an ambulance. Emergency services talked them through CPR over the phone. Ishan went floppy in her arms. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but they were unable to dislodge the piece of Lego blocking Ishan's airways. They rushed him to Royal Oldham Hospital. Every second mattered. At the hospital, the object was removed using forceps. It was a small plastic piece from the toy car, no larger than 3 centimeters. The extraction came too late. The time of death was confirmed at 12:01 that afternoon, just over a week before his 4th birthday. The official cause of death was asphyxiation due due to a foreign body. An inquest at Haywood Coroner's Court heard that Ashan was a well-nourished boy who lived in a loving environment and was not in the habit of putting objects in his mouth. His mother was surprised by what had happened. Assistant Coroner Peter Siggy ruled it an accidental death. The death of Michael Halby. On April 12, 2025, Michael Halby was skiing in the Swiss Alps. He was 64 years old and served as vice chairman of Kirkby, the parent company of the Lego Group. Halby was an experienced executive with decades in the industry, including his role as senior partner emeritus at McKinsey & Company, where he led operations across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. That day, he was far from any office. He was on the slopes of Verbier, one of the most exclusive ski resorts in Switzerland. The area is known for its pristine conditions and challenging terrain. Halby was skiing in the Verbier region when the accident occurred. Official statements from Kirkby indicate he fell on the piste, though multiple news reports suggest he went off-piste in the Col de Chasseur area, known for its steep and difficult terrain. The exact circumstance of the fall remain unclear from public reports. At some point during his descent, he fell. News outlets described it as a freak accident, the kind that seems impossible to predict or prevent. Emergency services responded immediately. A helicopter was dispatched to airlift him from the mountain. He was transported to the hospital, where medical personnel attended to him. However, he had sustained internal injuries from the fall that caused internal bleeding. Doctors at the facility tried to intervene, but he died shortly after arrival from internal bleeding. It was an unexpected and tragic end for a man who had gone skiing that morning. News of his death sent shockwaves through the LEGO organization and beyond. Halby had served on the Mary Foundation board for over 17 years and was a close friend of Denmark's Queen Mary and King Frederick. A freak accident on a Swiss mountain had claimed the life of one of the company's senior leaders and a trusted advisor to the Danish royal family, the lucky escape of Keen Halls. In mid-January 2016, 8-year-old Keen Halls was playing with Lego bricks at his home in Oxford, United Kingdom. Like many children his age, he had built with these toys countless times. The bricks were familiar objects, brightly colored and seemingly harmless. That day, Keen encountered a common problem. 2 bricks had locked together too tightly. He could not pull them apart with his fingers alone. He did what many children do in this situation. He put the bricks in his mouth and tried to use his teeth to separate them. It was a split-second decision, the kind made without thinking through the consequences. As he worked to separate them, one of the pieces went down his throat. The brick lodged itself in his airway. Keen immediately began choking. He could not breathe properly. His mother realized what was happening and smacked his back until it was bright red, trying to dislodge the piece. When it remained stuck, she called an ambulance. They were transported to John Radcliffe Hospital. At the hospital, doctors assessed the situation quickly. An X-ray revealed the brick was lodged deep in the tube of his right lung. They would need to perform emergency surgery to remove it. Just 1 hour after arrival, Keen was taken into theater for the procedure. The surgery successfully extracted the piece. It was a small green Lego brick with a distinctive feature, a tiny hole in its center. The doctors examined it carefully and delivered stunning news to Keen's mother, Laura. Her son was incredibly lucky to be alive. The hole in the brick had allowed a small amount of air to pass through. Doctors explained that air could get into the lung through the hole but struggled to get out, causing swelling. The hole, combined with the speed and skill of the paramedics and hospital staff, had saved his life. Keen recovered after being placed on steroids to reduce lung and throat swelling. The incident served as a stark reminder of how quickly a common toy could become dangerous, prompting his mother to launch the hashtag campaign Holes in Every Lego for safety awareness, paramedics' nightmare. On May 2nd, 2024, a 5-month-old boy suffered cardiac arrest at Legoland Windsor in the United Kingdom. The incident occurred near the Coast Guard HQ boat ride, where visitors were queuing between approximately 11:30 a.m. and 12:45 p.m. that afternoon. A retired paramedic, Matthew Burns, age 60, was at the park with his family when he heard a woman screaming for help. Burns, along with another off-duty paramedic who was also present, immediately responded. According to Burns' account to the Daily Mail, when he reached the infant, the boy was clinically dead, blue and floppy, and not breathing. The baby, who was in a carrier strapped to his mother, had no detectable pulse. The 2 medical professionals performed infant CPR for approximately 20 minutes. Legoland's first aid team arrived during the resuscitation effort and provided oxygen and additional medical equipment. After continued CPR, the responders were able to restore the infant's pulse and breathing shortly before emergency services arrived. The child was then transported to hospital for emergency treatment. The infant remained in critical condition in the hospital. According to Thames Valley Police, the baby died on May 5th, 2024, 3 days after the cardiac arrest. Some sources report the death occurred on May 6th. Following the incident, a 27-year-old woman from Witham, Essex, was arrested on May 2nd on suspicion of neglecting a child to cause unnecessary injury. She was released on police bail until July 26, 2024. Thames Valley Police's Child Abuse Investigation Unit launched an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the incident. Detectives Detective Constable Zoe Eel stated that police were not seeking any other suspects and requested that the public avoid speculation while the investigation continued. The death of the Lego founder. On March 11, 1958, Ole Kirk Christiansen died in Billund, Denmark. He was 66 years old and had spent his entire adult life working with wooden toys. Christiansen was a carpenter by trade, a man who had built his business from nothing during the hardest years of the Great Depression. He had founded the Lego Group in 1932, originally producing wooden toys like pull-along ducks and building blocks. For more than 2 decades, wood had been the foundation of everything he created. But in the final years of his life, the company had shifted direction. His son, Godfred Kirk Christiansen, had begun experimenting with plastic. The material was cheaper, more durable, and could be molded into precise interlocking shapes. 6 weeks before Ole Kirk's death, on January 28th, Godfred had filed a patent for a revolutionary design, the modern stud-and-tube coupling system. It was the innovation that would transform Lego from a small Danish toy maker into a global empire. The tiny plastic brick, with its distinctive bumps on top and hollow tubes underneath, would become one of the most recognizable objects in the world. Ole Kirk Christiansen never saw the full impact of this innovation. By the mid-1950s, his health had been declining, forcing him to gradually hand over daily operations to Godfred, who became managing director in 1957. On March 11, 1958, Ole Kirk suffered cardiac arrest. The man who had spent decades carving wooden toys by hand was gone. His death came as his company was transforming. The wooden era was fading. Production would continue until 1960, when a fire finally ended it. The plastic era was accelerating. The patent his son had filed would become the foundation of Lego's success, and the company would explode into international markets throughout the 1960s and 70s. By the time Ole Kirk's grandchildren were adults, Lego would be worth billions. The small plastic brick would become the world's most powerful toy brand, sold in every country, recognized in every language. But the founder, the carpenter who had started it all, died before witnessing the empire his work had created. The maintenance tunnel, death. On February 5th, 2022, Shane Roy Gunzer died while working at Legoland New York Resort in Goshen. He was 33 years old and served as the park's chief hotel maintenance engineer. The resort had opened only months earlier. The theme park opened to the public on May 29, 2021, followed by the hotel's grand opening on August 6, 2021, making it the newest Legoland location in the world. Behind the colorful exterior and family-friendly attractions lay extensive infrastructure, 17 miles of piping and conduit installed during construction, necessary to keep the massive complex running. Gunzer was performing his duties that day. A graduate of Washingtonville High School, he had worked as a plumber with Local 373 and spent time with Nebraska Plumbing and Heating before accepting his position at Legoland, New York. His co-workers described him as the person who would always lend a hand and say hello to everyone. They loved his character and enthusiasm for life. Gunzer died while at work on February 5th. Details surrounding his death have not been released. The park administration released a brief statement acknowledging the loss of their employee. A Legoland New York spokesperson stated they were deeply saddened and offered counseling and support to affected staff members. New York State Police investigated the incident. Trooper Stephen Neville stated that Gunzer's death did not appear to be drug-related and no foul play was suspected. Investigators awaited a determination from the medical examiner's office regarding the cause of death. Neville did not confirm whether the death was work-related. The newly opened resort now carried the weight of an employee fatality. For staff who had worked alongside Gunzer, the shock was profound. He had been developing what colleagues called a rewarding career. The cause of death was never publicly released. Investigation findings remained undisclosed. What exactly happened during Shane Roy Gunzer's shift that day was never made public. He had gone to work at a facility designed to bring joy to families, and he never came home. The murder of Lucille Johnson. On the afternoon of February 1st, 1991, 78-year-old Lucille Johnson was last seen alive, sweeping the porch of her home in Holiday, Utah. The next day, she was found dead inside. She had been beaten and strangled. The attack was brutal and prolonged. Her body showed signs of a violent struggle. She had fought back against her attacker, clawing at them with enough force to collect skin cells beneath her fingernails. But it had not been enough to save her. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found something unusual. A trail of Lego bricks was scattered across her living room floor, through the entryway, and continued out into the driveway. The colorful plastic pieces seemed out of place in the home of an elderly woman living alone. Detectives asked her family about the toys. They explained that Johnson's grandchildren visited occasionally, occasionally, but she was a meticulous housekeeper. She would never leave toys scattered around her home like that. The family insisted the Legos should not have been there. The case went cold. For 22 years, Lucille Johnson's death remained unsolved. Detectives had no solid leads. The DNA technology available in 1991 was limited. Evidence sat in storage, waiting for science to catch up. In August 2013, investigators reopened the case. They sent the DNA samples collected from beneath Johnson's fingernails to a modern laboratory. The results came back with a match: John Sanzing, a man already serving time on death row in Arizona for another murder. But the investigation revealed something far more disturbing. When detectives examined the old Lego bricks from the crime scene, they found fingerprints. The prints were small, belonging to a child. They matched Sanzing's son, who had been only 5 years old in 1991. Police believe Sanzing brought his young son with him when he committed the murder. The child's fingerprints on the scattered Legos suggested his presence during the crime. John Sanzing was charged with first-degree murder and later pleaded guilty. He remains in prison in Arizona, where he continues to serve his death sentence. Lawyer shoots himself. On June 17, 1871, defense attorney Clement Vallandigham was in Lebanon, Ohio, preparing for the biggest moment of his murder trial. His client, Thomas McGeehan, was charged with shooting a man dead during a barroom brawl on Christmas Eve the previous year. Vallandigham's defense was simple and clever. He believed the victim had shot himself accidentally while drawing a pistol from his coat pocket. To prove it, he planned a courtroom demonstration. That evening, Vallandigham gathered his defense team in his hotel room at the Lebanon house to rehearse. 2 revolvers sat on the table. One was loaded, one was not. He explained the theory, reached for what he believed was the unloaded pistol, placed it in his coat pocket, and acted out the motion of drawing it. The gun discharged into his abdomen. He sank into a chair and reportedly said, "I have foolishly shot myself." Surgeons were summoned immediately. They probed for the bullet, which they believed had lodged near the bladder, but were unable to locate it. His body was packed in ice through the night. He died of peritonitis the following day. The demonstration had worked. Despite Vallandigham's death, the jury found Thomas McGeehan not guilty. He walked out of court a free man. 4 years later, McGeehan was shot to death in his own saloon, Daredevil and the Peel. On July 25, 1911, Bobby Leach became the first man in history to survive going over the Horseshoe Falls at Niagara in a steel barrel of his own design. The barrel fell 167 feet. Leach survived with 2 broken kneecaps, a fractured jaw, and several broken ribs. He spent 6 months in hospital and then spent years touring the world with the battered barrel, giving lectures about his feat. He was known for defying death. He attempted to swim the Whirlpool Rapids below the falls in his 60s and had to be rescued more than once. Nothing killed him. On February 26, 1926, Leach was 69 years old and on a speaking tour in Auckland, New Zealand. He was walking near his flat on Princess Street when he slipped on an orange peel and broke his leg. The leg became infected. Gangrene set in. The leg was amputated. He died of complications on April 28, 1926. A New Zealand newspaper's obituary quoted a colleague who remarked that having defied death 100 times, he at last owed his end to a piece of orange peel. His gravestone in Auckland's Hillsborough Cemetery reads, "World famous by his trip over Niagara Falls in a barrel." Electric chair, toilet edition. In 1983, Michael Anderson Godwin was convicted of murder in South Carolina and sentenced to die in the electric chair. His attorneys appealed, and the death sentence was overturned. His sentence was reduced to life imprisonment at the Central Correctional Institution. By the accounts of prison officials, Godwin spent his remaining years as a model prisoner. He earned 2 college degrees and hoped to eventually be released on parole to work with young people. He was 28 years old on March 5, 1989. That evening, he sat naked on the steel toilet in his cell, attempting to repair a pair of earphones connected to his plugged-in television set. He bit into the electrical wire. The metal commode completed the circuit. Godwin was electrocuted. Corrections officers found him dead during a routine check. Richland County Coroner Frank Barron noted that Godwin's mouth and tongue were severely burned. The death was ruled an accident. State Corrections spokesman Francis Archibald confirmed the circumstances in a brief statement. It was a strange accident. He was sitting naked on a metal commode. The same method of execution he had once been sentenced to serve in a controlled setting had now found him in a prison cell, delivered by a television repair job in a steel toilet. Drowned at lifeguard party. In August 1985, the New Orleans Recreation Department threw a party for its lifeguards. The occasion was significant. It was the first summer season in living memory in which not a single person had drowned in any of the city's public pools. The celebration was held at the New Orleans Recreation Department Center. Approximately 200 people attended. About half of the guests were lifeguards, and 4 of them remained officially on duty throughout the event. Jerome Moody, 31 years old, was among the guests. He was not a lifeguard. courtyard. He had not been swimming. He was fully clothed. At the end of the night, the 4 on-duty lifeguards began clearing the pool. They found Moody's body at the bottom of the deep end. They pulled him out and attempted to revive him. They could not. Coroner Frank Minyard confirmed via autopsy that Jerome Moody had drowned. How he entered the pool undetected at a party attended by roughly 100 trained lifeguards, 4 of whom were on duty, was never established. Department Director Madeline Richard confirmed the circumstances in a statement to the press. "The lifeguards were really upset," she said. "It's a real tragedy. This was the first annual party in memory where they could celebrate a trouble-free season. Window strength guaranteed." On the evening of July 9th, 1993, Gary Hoy was hosting a reception on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower for prospective articling students interested in joining his law firm, Holden Day Wilson. Hoy was 38 years old, a corporate and securities law specialist, and by all accounts a respected and well-liked member of the firm. He had a party trick. He would demonstrate the tensile strength of the building's windows by throwing his full body weight against the glass. He had done it many times before without incident. The glass had always held. That evening, Hoy made his first run at the window. The glass held. He made his second run. This time, the glass did not break. Instead, the window frame gave way. Hoy and the intact window fell 24 floors into the courtyard below. He was killed on impact. Police arrived to find the glass still unbroken. Structural engineer Bob Greer told the Toronto Star, "I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass window and withstand it." Police classified the death as accidental auto-defenestration. 3 years later, Holden Day Wilson closed its doors, with Hoy's death cited as a contributing factor in the firm's collapse. Scourge falls quietly. By the year 453, Attila the Hun was the most feared military leader in the known world. He had brought the Eastern and Western Roman empires to their knees, extracted enormous tributes from Constantinople, and driven Roman forces from the Balkans and Italy. He was known to his enemies as Flagellum Dei, the Scourge of God. In early 453, he took his last wife, a young woman named Ildiko, and celebrated the marriage with a night of feasting and heavy drinking at his palace in Pannonia, in what is now Hungary. His guards became concerned when he failed to emerge the following morning. They broke down the door. They found Attila dead in his bed, his face and body covered in blood, with Ildiko weeping at his side. There were no wounds. Roman historian Priscus, a diplomat who had personally dined with Attila, recorded the account. Attila had suffered a massive hemorrhage, most likely a nosebleed brought on by heavy drinking, and choked on his own blood while lying on his back in a stupor. Some historians have proposed ruptured internal blood vessels as an alternative cause, brought on by years of excessive alcohol consumption. Assassination theories involving Ildiko exist, but have no direct supporting evidence. The man who had terrorized 2 empires was found dead in his own bed, bled out in the night. He was approximately 47 years old. Dancer's last exit. On the evening of September 14th, 1927, American dancer Isadore Duncan stepped into an open-top Amilcar sports car in Nice, France, owned by Benoit Falchetto, a French-Italian mechanic. She was 50 years old and widely regarded as the founder of modern dance. Before leaving, she wrapped a long hand-painted silk scarf around her neck. A friend staying with her that night, Mary Desty, had warned her about the scarf before she got into the car. Duncan dismissed the concern. The car pulled away from the curb. Almost immediately, the scarf became entangled in the rear, spoked wheel and axle of the vehicle. The force of the rotating wheel yanked the scarf with sudden violence. Duncan was pulled sideways out of the car and killed. Her neck was broken. The death was instantaneous. The day before, she had told a reporter from the Associated Press, "For the first time, I am writing for money. Now I am frightened that some quick accident might happen." She had spent her entire life in motion on stage, commanding her body with extraordinary precision. The instrument of her death was the same thing that had defined her career. She moved, and it killed her. Sigurd and the trophy. In approximately the late 9th century, according to the Orkney-Inga saga, Sigurd the Mighty, Earl of Orkney, met his death in the most unnecessary way imaginable. He had formed an alliance with Thorstein the Red and was consolidating control over parts of Scotland when a feud developed between him and a Scottish magnate named Malbright of Moray. The two sides met in battle. Sigurd won. Malbright was killed. In keeping with the customs of Norse warfare, Sigurd had the severed head of his defeated enemy strapped to his saddle as a trophy of victory. He rode north. As he traveled, Malbright's protruding teeth cut into Sigurd's leg. The wound seemed minor. It was not. The cut became infected. The infection spread. Sigurd the Mighty died from the wound. A Norse warrior who had carved territory out of Scotland, survived combat, and defeated his enemies in the field, was killed by the teeth of a man whose head he was carrying as a decoration. The Orkney-Inga saga records the death without particular irony. It simply states what happened. The outcome required no commentary from the author. Salute gone wrong. On December 12th, 1794, American sea captain John Kendrick was anchored in Honolulu Harbor in the Kingdom of Hawaii aboard his vessel, Lady Washington. He had just helped a local Hawaiian chief win a decisive battle against a rival, and the British vessel Jackal, under Captain William Brown, was present in the harbor. To mark the occasion and honor Kendrick, the Jackal's crew fired a ceremonial cannon salute. One of the cannons had been left loaded with grape shot. The shot tore through Kendrick's vessel and killed him on deck. Kendrick was dead from a salute fired in his honor by an Allied ship. The cannon had not been fired in anger, in battle, or in error of judgment about an enemy. It had been fired in celebration of a man who was then killed by it. John Kendrick had sailed the Pacific for years, becoming one of the first Americans to trade along the northwest coast and in Hawaii. He had survived the open ocean, foreign ports, and the hazards of 18th century maritime exploration. He did not survive a congratulatory cannon. King of the Semla. On February 12, 1771, Adolf Fredrik, King of Sweden, sat down to a meal. The meal included lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne. For dessert, he ate semla, a traditional Swedish cream-filled wheat bun served in warm milk. He ate 14 of them. King Adolf Fredrik was 60 years old and had ruled Sweden since 1751, though real political power during most of his reign rested with the Swedish parliament, leaving him with limited authority. History has not remembered him for his governance. Adolf Fredrik died later that day of severe digestive complications following the meal. Swedish school children learn about him to this day. He is remembered in Sweden with a certain affectionate bluntness as the king who ate himself to death. The 14 servings of semla are always mentioned. He had managed to convert a throne, a crown, and decades of royal life into a footnote defined entirely by dessert. His death was confirmed February 12, 1771. He was succeeded by his son, Gustav III, who went on to accomplish considerably more before being shot at a masquerade ball. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.